Since this month's theme is love, I thought it might be useful to discuss some of the different forms of love. In Christian thought, there are four usual descriptions which take their cue from the Greek: eros, philia, storge, and agape. In Buddhist thinking, there are similar ways of considering love, and I will attempt to describe some of these ideas as well. So let's start with eros, which is romantic love. It usually involves passion and sexuality, and often a very deep human connection involving mind, emotion, and body. This is the stuff of country and Western music. Eros is probably at the center of most movies and books in one way or another. Eros cements the survival of our species. Without it, we probably would not propagate. Unfortunately, run amok, it has now threatened our extinction, as we have taken over the planet in such a way that the planet can barely sustain us. But that is a topic, perhaps, of another sermon. The second form of love is philia, which is what may be considered a companionship sort of love. We celebrate philia every Sunday downstairs in the Safford room. It is about friendship, a connection of human to human, where we share thoughts, feelings, attitudes, and beliefs together. It is the connection we have with our siblings. It can even be the connection we have with our parents or our adult children, if we have been able to allow ourselves to see them as separate adults. The third form of love is called storge. This form of love has to do with duty. There is a certain selfishness to storge because there is usually a fear of social repercussions or an internal sense of guilt if one does not follow the responsibilities of this form of love. The son who visits his mother in the nursing home once a month, while actually wishing he didn't have to do so, is doing it out of storge. It is manifest, for example, in the couple who just got divorced, but the man gets diagnosed with cancer and the woman decides to care for him in his last days. Storge is not a bad thing. It helps grease the wheels of civilization. Although there is selfishness involved, there is also a sense of selflessness in it. Both are true. The fourth form of love is called agape, and is often described in Christian circles as the love of God to his church. However, we need to unpack this a bit more. I will do so by first taking a detour into Buddhist thought. In Buddhism, there is something called equanimity. This is a difficult idea to grasp, and even more difficult to practice. The Insight Meditation Center's website posted an article by Gil Fronsdale that describes equanimity as a combination of two concepts based on the Pali language. The first has to do with the ability to see without being caught up by what we see, or the idea of seeing with understanding. The second has to do with standing in the middle of all this. If one is imbued with equanimity, one sees drama and suffering all around them, notes it for what it is, but doesn't allow this drama to shape their inner peace. If a person embraces equanimity, then they will see that all humans are precious, as in our first principle, all humans have inherent worth. Also, all humans are connected in the web of life with all beings. The connection could be called love. If I understand this in a deep way, why wouldn't I extend my love and concern to all humans the same? Consequently, I think of equanimity as an embrace of love to all people equally. One way to foster equanimity is to notice what happens when it is absent. When the campfire destroyed the town of Paradise in California, I immediately thought of my son Daniel, who lives in Chico, which is only a few miles from Paradise. My heart went out to all the people of Paradise, in a general way, I suppose, but my caring for my son, my love for my son, greatly outweighed any concern for those who died or who were left homeless by the fires. There was another situation in Chico where there was a report of someone being shot dead in an apartment. I hoped it wasn't Daniel. This meant, of course, that I hoped it was someone else's son who was killed. I would imagine that if I had a relative who was a police officer in Houston and I heard that 4 officers were shot, I would hope that my relative was not one of the 4. This means, of course, that I hoped it was someone else that was shot. This reflects perhaps some combination of filial or storge form of love. It is not equanimity, nor is it agape love. I will give a couple of other examples from movies. In the movie I, Robot, anybody seen that? Will Smith is the actor. He plays a cop who was in an automobile accident along with another car. Both his vehicle and the other vehicle fall into the river. A robot nearby saw the accident and came to help. Will could see that there was a young girl in the other car. Will yelled at the robot to save the girl. The robot did a calculation and determined that the chances of Will surviving was 45%, and the chances of the girl surviving was 11%. The robot saved Will, and the girl died. In describing the experience, Will said, quote, 11% was more than enough. Any human being would have known that. What this story shows, I believe, is that we as humans have a powerful instinct to take care of the little ones, that their lives are more important than our lives as adults, that it is appropriate to sacrifice ourselves for the sake of the children. Another example was from a movie I once saw where a train engineer saw a figure standing on the tracks that appeared to be a young woman. He applied the brakes but could not stop in time and killed the person. By the way, I have heard that this is the biggest fear of train engineers. Anyway, in the movie, the engineer was being interviewed by the police, and in the course of the interview, the officer told the engineer that he had been mistaken and the figure was not a young woman, but was a young man. At that point, the engineer gave an involuntary sigh. This sigh, I believe, reflected the man's implicit belief that killing a young woman was a more grievous thing than killing a young man. I believe I would have given a similar sigh if I were to be in that position. What does this say about me? In each of these examples, there is a judgment that certain humans are more valuable than other humans. It would seem that this would be the opposite of equanimity. So my thought is that equanimity leads to a form of love that is universal, that embraces all that is, that on a deep level understands that the separations and distinctions, the polarities that we subscribe to, are in essence an illusion. I will repeat a stanza from the poem by Rumi that I read as my opening statement. Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. When the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to talk about. Ideas, language, even the phrase each other doesn't make any sense. At this point, I would ask you to take a look at the handout that you received in the order of service. This is a diagram designed by Jacob Ibrahim Abu Hamada in his blog entitled Ignorance and Wisdom, My Experiments with Truth. The only thing I added was the little arrows with the word equanimity. So devotion is a kind of commitment, some kind of sacrifice. As you go to the left, you embrace eros, philia, and or storge. Any of these three can lead to attachment, and the extreme shadow side of that is neurosis. On the other hand, if we go to the right, you embrace loving kindness, which is a reaching out to all sentient beings with love and concern, which leads to compassion and ultimately accepting all that is. One of my teachers, Ajashanti, calls this, allow everything to be as it is. From this flows equanimity. Bodhicitta is the sincere desire for all beings, including oneself, to reach enlightenment. This is in effect the highest form of love, which we call agape. Now I want to bring Rumi back into this picture. So Rumi reaches enlightenment through his passionate erotic relationship with Shams, the man he calls the friend in many of his poems. So I would invite you now to take the handout. I can find mine here. And I want you to curl it around in a circle so that agape covers up neurosis. Okay? You will see that another way to agape is through the ultimate form of attachment as described by Rumi.